Thank you for joining us. We're about to get started with a live Never Again podcast. Our guest tonight will be DOMINIC CARDY, who's MLPP, a Canadian politician and interim leader of the Canadian Future Party, to discuss this policy which is going on, which seems that pro-Hamas riots are permitted without consequences, while the right to counter-protest these is being forbidden. So I think it's important that we bring this to the forefront so everybody understands what's going on. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce MEIR, and then we'll get DOMINIC on, and I'll see you later. Over and out. MEIR?
Thank you, Gary. Welcome to our viewers. I'm going to ask everyone who's going to be joining us if you could please share this on whatever social media platform you're on. Right now, we're live on YouTube, on our website, IsraelNow.ca, and also on Twitter, known as X. So I'd appreciate it if everyone could please share this with their platforms. We'll reach a lot more people. The issue is a burning issue. Last week, as with every other week, there have been pro-Hamas rallies in downtown Toronto, taking over the streets. The police just looking on. Last week, something unique happened. Our guest this evening, DOMINIC CARDY, was downtown. He's from New Brunswick, and he was visiting Toronto, and he saw this pro-Hamas rally, and he just thought that he'd go there and he'd say something as a counter. And we're going to get into it. DOMINIC will explain, and he was arrested for it. And the pro-Hamas people who had no permit, that were blocking traffic, nothing happened to them. DOMINIC, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Certainly better than last Thursday night.
Yes, yes. I hope you're enjoying your stay in Toronto. I don't know if you're still in Toronto.
Still out my last night.
Okay, well, I'm hoping yourself and your wife are enjoying yourselves in the city. But
we spent a lot of time here in the city. This was an unusual circumstance, but like you said, these are kind of unusual times.
Right. Explain what happened.
Well, it's pretty much as you said. I was here in Toronto with my wife. She just arrived. I'd had some work meetings, and we literally just had a nap before getting up and going out to dinner in an evening. And I heard from the river to the sea being chanted outside the hotel. And parents had always raised me not to be a bigoted and also to take things like anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry seriously. And my wife said, I'm just not in my country. On my shoes, or ended up in Dundee, right in the city's country, and joined 500 weird supposed communists and Islamists,
right,
and saying over and over again, "Free Palestine," because I figured that's about as unconfrontational and unthreatening a statement to make, given that policy of the government of Canada and all of our. So accepting this the terror nation is not the government, what might one day be a democratic state. So kept chanting it. The protesters got pretty mad about that. There was some good security at the event provided by the protesters. A couple of very large, good at keeping them more away from. And after some time, police officers appeared on my said, great, I can. So I'm exercising my right to free speech, and I'll be staying here. And he then came back later. Said, if you don't take leaving, and staying. Edge of the crowd, many opportunities to say that I would not participate in the protest further. I would avoid the protest. I did carry on with my day, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. That not having my charter rights infringed. And so eventually, around this point, I realized that I was. They eventually took me down to the local police station, had me sit in the car for an hour or so, still with handcuffs on, and still tried to get me to. I would not participate in the protest. Tried to pressure. And she gave them a great line back, just saying, like, man, you don't know him very well. If you're trying to make him sign something, you're going to get to know him really well because he's going to be with you a long time. And then I was put in a lockup for a couple hours, and became free to go, no charges, conditions, and
Right. Dominic, it just seems that there's you're cutting out a little bit. I'm just wondering, because I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying, and then all of a sudden it's going silent. It's probably a connection from your end. Maybe at the early start. What's that?
I'm just on the cell signal. I'm just trying to see if there's anything. It's
Right.
giving me full bars. How's that? Is that a bit clear?
I could hear you now. Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
I'm also, you're cutting out for me a little bit too, so perhaps there's a network issue. But anyways, just tell me if you need me to repeat anything.
Might be better if you just quickly log off, log back on immediately, and then that should probably do the trick. Also, we have some footage we're going to show also when you come right back on of the arrest. We have that.
Sounds good.
Go ahead.
I'll log it back in a sec here.
Okay. Yes, everyone, in the meantime, if you could please share this, it's a very important issue. There we go. That's some video footage that we have of Dominic speaking up and getting arrested.
He's sweating like a pig. The man can't even handle the heat here. He can't handle the heat in Palestine. The man can't even handle Toronto heat. And he's sweating like a pig. Dirty ass. I don't know what he's doing. From Hamas. Free Palestine from Hamas. Free Palestine. Been killing Palestinians before Hamas even existed. Free Palestine. 50 years before Hamas even existed. Free Palestine from Hamas.
That's exactly what we want. We want to free the Arabs from Gaza from Hamas. Hamas is listed in Canada as a terrorist organization. They're an arm of radical Iran, and we can't let them dominate the streets in our cities. It's as simple as that.
Completely agree. It's completely unacceptable. Allowing groups to take advantage of Canadians to express not just intolerance, but genocide.
So we got
to hear people talking about the story of being a martyr, to hear people talking about the sacrifices that are being made by the Hamas leadership, to see people wearing Hania t-shirts, because this event that I was at where I was arrested was partly in protest at the assassination of one of Hamas's leaders. And the Hamas targeting symbols, I had various guys, I wish I'd gotten a picture of some of them doing the, I kept on doing this back at them, the heart, just to make them annoyed, but kept on doing the Hamas, the triangle.
The triangle.
Yeah, to make it clear that I was in their crosshairs. Like, yeah, I've worked in Afghanistan and lots of conflict zones. I'm not afraid of some punks in the streets in Toronto. But at the same time, they are frightening people. They are frightening my Jewish brothers and sisters, my neighbors, my fellow country people, and that is not on. And at some point, we have got to start saying again that the law is the law in this country. And no matter what extremist group you are part of, you do not have the right to seize our streets and to frighten other Canadians. Full stop. And we have got to recognize that community policing is a great model for handling youth gangs and handling vulnerable neighborhoods and building good, trusting relationships between our police and communities. It is entirely inadequate for handling political extremism, where absolutely those folks have got the right to say and believe whatever stupid, hateful things they say and believe, but they got to do it with a permit. And there has to be the right for Canadians who disagree to stand toe to toe with them and to say, no, not in our streets, not in our provinces, not in our country, and to make it clear that they do not have the support of the public. Because one of the things that this model of policing allows them to get away with is to think that everyone supports them. They're insulated from the reality that most Canadians view them as being dangerous extremists. They're insulated from the reality that they don't have that support. And so the more that there can be a return to old-fashioned democratic politics, which means sometimes confrontation with the police there to stop it from ever being violent, and from our side, always to be non-violent, that's what we've got to get back to, because this current model is astonishingly dangerous, both in terms of, again, the amplification it gives to extreme ideas, and as you rightly pointed out, the fact that Canadian streets are being occupied by people who are exerting force and control over them. And that is a dangerous, dangerous slope. I've lived in countries without the rule of law, and we do not want to go in that direction. We don't want to have groups controlling one intersection versus another, establishing their checkpoints that allow you to go past based on whether you pass an ideological litmus test or perhaps give a bribe. This is a disastrous way to go back to the way that most countries are still run, and Canada's blessed not to be. So God forbid that we slide backwards, and we do so under the guise of tolerance. Let's be tolerant, but let's have rules.
100%. Over the weekend, in fact, the exact same thing, taking over the streets downtown Toronto, and flaunting the Hamas triangle, flaunting it, and smoke bombs going off all over the place.
Well,
This morning, they took over the Gardiner Expressway downtown during rush hour. And they're trying to, and I saw this at University of Toronto also when they had an encampment. They're trying to build allies in the Indigenous population here in Canada. So they have managed to get a few of them and hide behind their flag, an Indigenous flag, to claim that Canada has no right to exist, period, and therefore we should have the right to take over, that they should have the right to take over the streets and do whatever they want. It's out of control.
Well, it is, but it's also no surprise. The same day that the protest took place when I was arrested, there was a report released laying out in detail the way in which the Iranian government supports, both financially and organizationally, some of these groups and their actions. We have got now 15 years of evidence of Russian efforts to interfere in politics in Western countries, no longer trying to push communism like they did back when we were kids, now recognizing that the best way to undermine the West is to sow division, to create dissent, to drive people towards extremes. And unfortunately for us, in a horrible historical accident, one of the most incredible inventions of Western civilization, the internet, happened to come along at the same time, and they just picked up, the dictators and the autocrats picked up those tools, made sure their citizens couldn't use them, and then just weaponized them against us. So it is no surprise that with the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians all creating a growing axis of autocracy, that we are seeing this happening on Canadian streets. It's been happening in the US for years, in Europe for years. We're just the latest in a list. Canada's been isolated and privileged for a long time. It's made us naive. It's made us dangerously soft. And unless we start to recognize this threat and to organize and take action against it using the best of our history, not adopting their lowest common denominator approach to politics, which is what they want. They want us to start street fighting, right? Because that way lies chaos, that way lies economic decline, social division, and the West becomes a less potent counter to the rise of China, Russia, and Iran. So let's use the best of our traditions to push back and show that just as they can find a couple of loopy Anglo-Saxons, loopy Jews, loopy First Nations folks to join their protests and give it some supposed legitimacy, let's show that most Canadians are part of a proudly multicultural country that adheres to the rule of law, democracy, free press, and free speech, including the right to be irritating, as they absolutely are, but within the limits of the law. And that means the necessity of a conversation around what democracy is, because we spent decades now talking about the rights that come with democracy and pushing the limits of democracy, which is an incredible privilege that comes from our wealth and success as a country. But democracy is as much what you are not allowed to do as it is what you are allowed to do. Because if it's simply a question that everyone is allowed to do whatever you want, and you claim that's democracy, that's just anarchy. That's chaos. So we clearly don't want that. So we clearly have to have those difficult conversations about at what point do we say, this seems like a pretty good place to start the conversation, that a listed terrorist organization acting on behalf of a hostile foreign state that is violently homophobic, misogynist, and against everything that Canada has said that it is for decades now, surely saying those folks at least should get a bloody permit before they go and start spewing their foul nonsense, at least that would be something that we could all agree is a democratic limit worth supporting.
100%. There should be, with the immigration policy also, that, I mean, we have lists. Canada has lists of what organizations are listed as terrorist organizations. There has to be better screening who is coming in. If you are part of, if you believe in that ideology of Hamas or Islamic Jihad or one of those terrorist organizations, and you're coming, you shouldn't be allowed to come into Canada. I mean, there are Arab countries that have embraced the Abraham Accords, for instance, peaceful countries that want good, strive for good. And, you know, we want them, we want everyone that wants a better life in Canada. But if you're coming with an ideology that you believe in, that, where's the immigration department? I remember testifying at the Duchesne Commission years ago when the issue was Nazi war criminals in Canada, and there was a list. There was a list of organizations that if you're a member of these particular Nazi organizations from Europe, you're not eligible to come into Canada. And some people were able to come in, and on that basis, there was grounds for deportation trials. Today, we have the list, like I said, of these various terrorist organizations, and if you support that, whoever is doing the screening, they're not doing the right job, or they don't have the experience. There's some problem there that has to be fixed.
I think that is very true. I think that we do absolutely need to strengthen our screening, but at the same time, we'll get people who lie. You probably saw the same video I did sometime just after October 7th with a guy in the streets in Montreal saying he just become a Canadian citizen and lied about every single question on the citizenship test to do with women's rights and whatever else. So, you know, there's a limit to what screening can be done there. So we need to do it for sure. But it's harder because, like you said, we're not talking about the Waffen-SS or specific military formations. We're talking about potentially radicalized populations where, as you know, you think of the Bin Ladens, you know, a huge, successful, very westernized family who had one exceedingly rotten apple in the gang.
Yeah.
So,
So good point.
So I think it's got to be deeper, and the problem is more difficult. We have avoided conversations about what it means to be Canadian, what it means to be a citizen in a Western liberal democracy for decades, because of fear on the anywhere left of the center that could be seen as being discriminatory and exclusionary. We have now had enough success at building a genuinely multicultural country with people who've come from around the world, who share all the values that you and I share, regardless of who they love, their skin color, or their faith. We need to build on that, saying that regardless of those things, we believe in free speech, freedom of the press, equality between men and women, the right to have a private life outside of government interference. And that's as potent a message against some of our extremist friends from the United States as it is against some of the Islamists who we deal with from time to time. So let's start defining that. Let's talk about what Canadian values are. And then we've got a basis on which to say, if you don't share these, you are not welcome here. Because we need immigrants, and we're going to need more of them as baby boomers leave the workforce and the earth over the course of the next couple of decades. So how are we going to handle that if we are not sure that the folks we're bringing in aren't here to try and undermine the basis of the success that attracted them to the country in the first place? And I say that as someone who is strongly pro-immigration.
Yeah.
But I always think back to, I worked in Bangladesh many years ago, so I've been following, amazing how Muslim government killing thousands of Muslims doesn't get any real attention, whereas, of course, Israel-Palestine, it's amazing the double standard and the attention that Israel gets. But that's an aside. I had an assistant when I was there, young woman, super smart. She wanted to get out of Bangladesh because it still isn't necessarily a great place to be a young woman, professional woman. I said, well, you should come to Canada. Canada is great. She said, yeah, the problem with coming to Canada is that I'll end up in a community where I'll be encouraged to move in to an area with other folks from Bangladesh. And they're the people I want to get away from. I want to get away from the old men with beards telling me who I can and can't talk to, what I can and can't wear. So more explicit celebration of what it means to live in a small L liberal society, and saying that, again, you want to start policing what people wear and how they behave, get lost. And being proud of that. And surely that's something that can unite people from across the spectrum, from the broad center to the broad left and right. This is a celebration of our history. It's a celebration of where we are. It's a celebration of actual equality. And it means some rules, because again, we are living in this dream world right now where the post-war consensus that gave us such wealth and power, and Canada was able to ride on the coattails of that with a lot of hard work on our part, of course, as well. But at a certain point, we stopped putting in the effort to maintain those structures and systems. And now we're just kind of running on fumes. So if we don't go back to thinking about how is it that we were able to build this incredibly wealthy, successful, relatively equal, despite the challenges we still have, this relatively equal country out of the tundra in the north of North America, and celebrate that, we're going to be done for. And instead we have a politics where we've got the Prime Minister apologizing for things that happened 100 years ago, the Leader of the Opposition saying Canada is broken. Where is the inspirational message saying this place is great? We have got challenges we can fix, but let's fix them together. And that means a stronger set of tools to be able to push back against some of these extremists who we do not want here, and who, if they are here, we need to push back against, with programs of civics and education to talk about how we can get people on board with this fantastic project of Western liberal democracy that has brought untold wealth, equality, and freedom to more people around the world than anything since we learned to walk on two legs.
Hey, listen, 100%. That's a fantastic presentation argument for Canada, 100%. Let me ask you, when you were arrested, and we'll come back to what you just said because it's great, and there's got to be programs and encouragement for that and head in that direction, and that is the perfect counter to what's going on. That is the answer. But when you were arrested by the police last week downtown, how did the police treat you in terms of the conversations with them? I mean, they put handcuffs on you. Was that really necessary? Did they say why? Were they rough to you in tone there? Or were they just saying kind of like, you know what, we're just doing our job. We're just trying to keep the peace. Just walk with us. And what was their attitude?
It was very much the latter, and that was, you pretty much mimicked the facial expressions of the officer. I had some really good chats over the course of my many hours in their company, and most of them got what I was doing. One of them absolutely didn't, and he was like, "Why are you doing this? Are you just trying to like show off?" It's like, "No, I'm not. Do you really think I want to spend the evening in jail? Do you really want to think I now have to check on every passport application? Anytime I go to another country, I've got to say were you arrested? I have to say yes. No, it's because this is important." And these people are over there are supporting a terrorist organization. You know, when I was arrested, the officer took me away and handcuffed me a meter or so away from an Israeli flag being trampled in the dirt that had been taken from a young Jewish woman who I've been in touch with since. We didn't see each other at the protest. She didn't get, according to her at least, the same treatment that I got. I was very polite with the officers and made it very clear that I respected their job and that they were following orders, as much as that's always a slightly uncomfortable thing to say for good reason. But it's still the fact that it is the politicians and the leadership of the police who have to change policy, not the officers on the beat. They are following, you know, the standard model for community policing that we've been chatting about and its deficiencies. But in general, it was a good conversation. And I started talking with them, saying, look, you guys realize you guys are next, right? Yeah, these are the all cops are bastards people. These are the people who have been arguing that we are somehow going to become miraculously the only country in the history of the planet not to require law enforcement, despite the fact that their presence here today demonstrates why we need stronger law enforcement. Talked a little bit about some of the things we've already chatted about, the fact that these groups are being pushed by hostile foreign governments who are trying to undermine our country. And this has happened for hundreds of years. We've all, for those of us who are history buffs, read the histories of our country and others. This isn't abnormal human behavior. we've just been so lucky that we've lived in this bubble of prosperity and peace over the last decades that we don't get how what we're living through is not normal. This is the exception. And my God, we should fight to protect it. So some of the officers absolutely got that. We had some really interesting conversations. They were generally, they could see that I didn't really need to be in handcuffs. Didn't stop them from leaving them on me until I was booked. They went from having me handcuffed with my hands behind my back initially, and in the cruiser for at least an hour. Then they took them off, handcuffed me in front, and those handcuffs stayed on until I was placed into a police cell and locked in.
Wow.
So I'm 6'3", so maybe they were worried I was going to fall on someone, but I'm only 75 kilos, so I'm a pretty scrawny guy. I don't think that I was really any genuine physical threat. But they did talk about how, that they were taking me away to protect my safety. That's sort of an odd thing. Like we said, let's apply that to any other situation where a citizen is facing crime. You arrest the victim, or do you recognize that the people who are committing the crime are the ones who should be removed from the scene? And of course, the officer, one of them, because I said that, said, well, there's 500 of them. Like, yeah, why is there 500 of them? Because when there were 20, we did nothing. And when there were 40, we did nothing. You could have dealt with them when there were 20. You could have dealt with them when there were 40. And we've allowed it to grow. And so now we're in a position where we are providing police services and support for terrorist organizations marching in our streets. It's just not going to end well, to put it politely. You don't have to be a psychic to see where this is going, because these protests are reaching the point now where they feel they're able to act with impunity. And I've been a consistent voice against lawbreakers my entire time in politics, because I spent years working in countries that had no laws and saw how terrifying it was. So 12 years ago, 13 now, I was arguing in New Brunswick against First Nations blockades of our highways. We had Mohawk warriors flying the same flags we saw today down in the Gardner. Guys had guns. There were explosives there. So this is not on. I fully support First Nations rights. We've got to figure out how we actually handle, not just spend money on and talk about, handle the grievances those communities have based on all the historical inequities that happened. But you can't break the law. The convoy happened. I was a cabinet minister in New Brunswick at that point. You can't go out and break the law and then not expect to get arrested. And of course, when the convoy was ended by the police, at that point, the protesters felt understandably totally betrayed. We've been here for weeks. What's going on? What changed? And nothing had really changed. It's just people got fed up. So unless you stamp out law breaking when the law is broken, you create a culture of impunity that spreads. So we've seen it go from First Nations groups to the convoy, now to these Hamas adjacent groups. It is going to continue to get worse, because ultimately what we're telling people is that you get one more person than there are police officers available to patrol your area, and you can do what you like. And that is a terrifying message, and only one that would only work even in the interim in a country as stable and peaceful as Canada. But we will radically become less stable, and we will quickly become less peaceful if we don't take corrective action, because politics is a constantly dynamic, changing force, and people will continue to expand their voices and occupy more and more space in our streets if we don't start to enforce the laws that we already have. We don't need new ones. We didn't need the Emergency Act in Ottawa. We need to tell people, do you want a permit? Go to City Hall and get one. It takes 5 minutes, for God's sake. This isn't, we're not in some police state here where this is a massive, complex process. Go get a permit.
No, 100%. Back in, I think it was late November or early December, either or. Went on for a number of weeks, that these pro-Hamas gangs decided they were going to target the Jewish community in Toronto at Avenue Road and the 401. There's a bridge there. So they thought that they would, and there's a large Jewish community there, so they for sure picked that area specifically. In fact, we have them on video calling the area a Zionist-infested area.
Remember.
So they went there one time, first with just a few. Then they said they're coming the next weekend So I decided I'm going to organize a counter protest there. And I did. And now it really caught the police's attention because they wanted to, the pro-Hamas gangs, they wanted to hang banners and signs and everything off the bridge where the 401 is. And there's always the possibility that something could come loose, and you can imagine it would be a disaster for drivers, for traffic. There could be accidents, mass accidents, if something falls from above on from the bridge. So we had a counter protest there, and the police, they weren't sure what to do. So first they wanted to isolate the groups, move, you're on that side, and those guys are on the other side, and so on and so forth. There was a large police presence. Moving forward, the police decided if there's and I would get all kinds of phone calls from police personnel. Are you planning another counter protest? And I would always say, I mean, I've been doing this for years, active fighting against anti-Semitism, and today against these pro-Hamas gangs. And I knew how to talk to the police that I don't have to say every single plan, but my intention is that we don't want these pro-Hamas gangs coming into the Jewish community. We don't want them going anywhere in the city harassing people. But closer to home, we don't want them coming into the Jewish community. And more than likely, we will have a counter protest. And on the basis of that, that was the argument that forced the police to say, we're not going to allow any gathering on the bridge, because if there's any friction back and forth, the likelihood that something will fall from the bridge, we cannot allow that to happen. Therefore, they invoked the law, and it's been peaceful in that area ever since. There's got to be counter protests against these Hamas gangs downtown taking over the streets. I can't see it any other way, and I believe the public is really fed up with what's going on. Like I mentioned this morning, on the Gardner Expressway, their car during rush hour in the morning, their cars are being blocked. Nobody wants that.
Well, and it's, yeah, and I think that is absolutely 100% true. And I've been shocked at the thousands of messages received since my arrest last week, and apart from Hamas adjacent folks who were less than pleased, but everyone else just, thank you, we need more of this. I just keep on saying, you do it too. Like, this is all that's required for a citizen in a democracy is to take their body to a place and then use their voice to express an opinion. And as long as you do it lawfully, keep your hands in your pockets, don't touch or push anyone, then you're within your rights. And if the police are going to start judging which political speech is acceptable and which isn't, let's make that a public conversation. And a few hours by some of us spent in jail cells is a small price to pay to reignite a conversation that is so long overdue that our country's at risk. Because I was thinking as you were speaking about what's been happening with the protest on the bridge and the protest that you were able to successfully disrupt just by promising to do your job as a democratic citizen and turn up, that the protesters are taking inspiration from throughout the pandemic. It became normal for anti-vaxxers and others to turn up at the homes of public health officials and politicians and to threaten them. And the police did the same thing. So I've had that people saying, oh, well, politicians are privileged. It's like, actually, politicians were the canary in the coal mine with this during the pandemic, when it became normal to just go to people's homes using information that is much easier to get thanks to social media, and to harass people and their families. So as soon as harassing people where they live becomes normal, it's not a very big step to say, well, they did it for that group. Those guys don't like. I don't like Jews. Let's go and find where the Jews live. And that's what's happening. And the chance of that becoming less of a problem is zero unless there's corrective action taken. And I think that was the part that I got the most attention from the police. We're saying, like, where do you think this is going to go? The last 4 years of trying this and seeing this in increasingly high pressure political environments through COVID, the convoy, and now this, and with some First Nations blockades mixed in sporadically, What do you think is going to happen? Is this going to get better? Is it getting better? Not really. Okay. So in that case, presumably some sort of change is required, and a change that protects and preserves our right, again, including the right to be obnoxious and awful, as long as you do it with a permit somewhere that's not bothering people. Or it can be at City Hall or whatever. It can bother people, but not like to your point, not block traffic, not stop people from going about their business, not some of those utterly bizarre protests against businesses that had absolutely nothing to do with Israel, Palestine, or even the region in some cases, like the attacks on the Zara clothing chain. This stuff is just nonsense. And until we as a society say we've lost our patience with nonsense, we're going to see the nonsense that's infecting our culture, that's been getting worse by the year. It's going to start to stop us from being able to function. It's certainly already getting close to that point. It is going to get worse. We are seeing likelihood of a regional war in the Middle East. God knows what's going to happen with Russia's imperial war against Ukraine. I was in Taiwan this time last year. We're there preparing for an invasion that the Chinese say is coming within 3 years. The Chinese government says that by 2026, that they aim for reunification. So we've got the likelihood of all of our geopolitical enemies, who are all expert at foreign interference, all playing out their politics on our streets unless we do something about it. So just as with the convoy, where things were made much worse by the way the convoy was dispersed, we've got to recognize as well that the longer we wait, the angrier people will be when we do take action.
Right.
And so the initial point when we push back against these Hamas folks is going to be an outpouring of support for them. Because people will be like, they've been doing this for months. What's the problem? Why are you knocking them about the head and locking them up now? So the longer you delay enforcing the law, the more laws you need to enforce. And that's what those guys want, because they want to see us chaotic. They want to see us divided. They want to see police knocking people's heads, because that's a sign of a country in decline. And that's an enemy that they have to worry about less in the geopolitical fight that's going on around the world right now between autocrats, the theocrats, and the Democrats.
Yeah, well, then that's what I'm going to do. I was just chatting after your arrest with a number of people about that, the importance that now's the time we have to really step up and mount a campaign of counter-protests and continuous. And
And one of the things I'd encourage people like you who've got a public space and profile too, is there are easy basic trainings on how to handle being in a confrontational situation. And so my life before politics at home, I worked in a democracy promotion for an American organization around the world. And there was a lot of that sort of work, just how not to get yourself hurt in a protest, how to protest, and giving people those skills so they can feel they've got that agency, knowing that if they get arrested, one of the messages I've been trying to get to folks is like, hey, everyone in Toronto, if you say free Palestine from Hamas, it is now something that you will not be charged for, because I proved that, because they arrested me, tried to figure out what to do, and in the end did nothing. So that's safe speech now. So go out and Toronto, put your hands in your pockets, say it loud and proud, free Palestine from Hamas, and see what happens. Reclaim that space for, literally in that case, the speaking of a liberal party foreign policy plank, which is, again, I still find that so weird, that the incredible weakness of our government, that I still managed to get arrested for uttering one of their fairly milquetoast slogans. But anyway.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Listen, we're going to wrap up in a moment, but final message for our supporters out there.
Final message is use your rights. We fought for them for a long time. Do not give them up. And when I say use them, don't just think about that. Go out and you hear hateful speech. If it's, again, someone saying Sieg Heil, someone saying death to Arabs, or saying from the river to the sea, go out and tell them that's not Canadian, it's not good enough, and you're not going to put up with it. And keep doing that, and put a little bit of yourself on the line. If we don't make small sacrifices now, I gave up an evening on a long weekend in the summer. That's not going to be anything that's going to damage my life. Most people watching your show are in that same position. Make a stand. Because if we don't, we're going to let the standing be done by those folks who are seizing our streets. And that way lies chaos and division and the loss of the freedoms to be able to peacefully disagree with ourselves that the people who built this country have fought for long and hard. And I want us to be able to have the space to continue to fix our problems, not to go back to arguing about whether or not it's okay to arbitrarily detain people. So we've got a country to win.
100%. What was the reaction from your wife? You were here to enjoy yourself with your wife. Like you said, you had a nap in the afternoon. You're looking forward to an evening out, and all of a sudden, boom.
So she married me, so she kind of knew what she was signing up for. And I think I mentioned earlier that the 1 second she's hearing from me saying, "I'm not putting up with this. I'm going to go and say something." Close the door of the hotel room. A couple hours later, she gets a call from my number, but it's an officer at the end saying that your husband's been arrested. And she's like, "Oh." She's like, "I just wanted to finish my nap," but she's been great. She is my partner in. I guess I can't say crime because I wasn't charged. My partner in this. My political adventures. She's got my back 100%. And I think I told you the line that she gave to the cops when they tried to go around me to guilt her into getting me to sign something saying that I wouldn't go and protest other.
Oh boy.
And she just said, like, yeah, it's like, you're going to be spending a lot more time with Dominic if you think that he's going to sign anything like that. So she knows me well, for better or worse, and I couldn't do this without her. I love her dearly.
Well, good. Yeah, because she phoned me last week and about that I sent you a message. I'd like to have you on the show, so we were chatting a little bit, and sounds like a wonderful woman. But
she's actually spent quite. I haven't had the chance to be able to visit Israel yet. She's been multiple times. Has been to the Palestinian territories. She's worked on refugee law and helping refugees in Egypt. She's seen some of this stuff firsthand, as I have, about what happens when you don't have the rules and the structures and the institutions that we are so blessed to have. And I shouldn't say blessed because it's not some gift from God. It's something that we built. And knowing that, I think, makes her just as scared as I am about what happens if we lose sight of how important it is to maintain our institutions. You know, we can argue about what shape they're in and about how to fix them, but again, this idea that they're either perfect or have to be just dismantled and replaced is ludicrous. And it would be giving away the miracle that is this country and other Western democracies that have attracted people from around the world, because they give normal folks like us the chance to live a life where we don't have to worry about being arbitrarily detained by cops, where we can own our property, where we can love who we want. And these are gifts that are so unusual in the history of our species that I think it's a little bit, my life out of politics, I'm a pilot. And I think it's a little bit like flying after 100 years, that we've lost sight of what a miracle it is that we experience every day.
Wow.
We're going through the cultural equivalent right now of flying above the clouds, looking out and closing the windows because we want to watch the in-flight rebroadcast of Friends. We've got to open the windows, recognize what a miracle it is that we experience every day, and make sure that we play our part to keep that plane in the air.
Well, thank God with all that, we have the opportunity to share on social media today, especially on Twitter. I remember when it was other ownership, before Elon Musk took over that, there was so much censorship that if you are...
That's still going on. I was actually dealing today with, I'm very active in working to try and support the Ukrainian cause in their fight against Russian imperialism. And Ukrainian voices are continuously deplatformed, deboosted from that. But I think that's just, I think Mr. Musk is an interesting personality who has
definitely
varied perspectives on different things, and at least in this one area, I'm happy that I agree with him. Certainly don't on most others, but it's regardless, the fact that we have those opportunities to talk across the world with social media is another astonishing miracle, as much as we are grossly misusing it for ripping each other apart in politics. But if we can remember the good old days when we thought the internet was going to be a force for good, and it was mainly cat videos and porn.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's these are, and I think, I mean, this is what makes any of these conversations so complicated. We're dealing with a globalized world with social media that transcends national boundaries and causes group identities that have got nothing to do with where you were born or where you live, or in some cases who you are, because you can disguise your identity. So all of these different things happening at the same time coupled with the rise of a sadly Western-funded autocracy, and especially in China, where we gave them all of our intellectual property and our money, which they're now using against us.
Right.
All of these things happening, a real threat to Western values for the first time ever. The technology that we gave the world being used against us, the freedoms that we have being used against us. It's an incredible point of testing for us as a society. So let's make sure we get into training as quick as we can and win this fight.
Absolutely. Dominic, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you very much also for stepping up to the plate last week and taking a stand and inspiring a lot of people, because I've been reading the messages also on social media, especially on Twitter, about that encounter last week. And like I said before, many Canadians are so fed up with what's going on. And when they see that, they really appreciate it. We just have to make sure that people move into action from that, which I believe is not far away at all. I believe people do want to take positive action to stop this and marginalize the pro-Hamas gangs and build the society to the greatness that it should be.
Yep, let's get back to having our politics decided during. Remember those good old days when we used to talk about how incredibly dull politics were, and the parties were all the same, and we were just arguing about whether or not we'd go 2% or 2.5% in one direction. Kind of nice to have that again. Let's see if we can find
differences. Yeah.
Excellent. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much. For
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Going to ask everyone who has been watching if you could please share this on the various platforms that you have. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp groups, email lists. We'd really appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people. Thank you very much.